Hello everyone. Okay. Hello everyone. Hope all of you are in good health and doing well. This evening we have with us Mr. Mani Rangarajan for our guest speaker talk series. On behalf of the batch of XPGDM 2021-2022, we welcome you, sir, and also thanking you for taking out some time to address us on a weekend. Thank you, sir. So, for the audience, let me quickly brief about a little bit of background about Sir's profile. Mr. Mani is currently the Group CEO of the Elara Group, which is the only full stack real estate company in India. This group operates Housing.com, Makaan.com, two of India's largest real estate portals, and also PropTiger.com, one of India's leading channel partners. Here at the group, he heads sales, business development, monetization, marketing, operations, and research. Sir has a global career across different sectors and has held executive roles in several companies like Citigroup, Yahoo, and also with some leading Silicon Valley companies, startup companies like Cosmix, Cloudera, Climate Corporation. He is an alum of IIM Calcutta and Stanford University's Graduate School of Business. He is also a cost and works accountant. That's pretty much about, sir. I would like to hand over to you. The podium is all yours. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor to address the future business leaders of tomorrow. It takes me back to my days at IIM Calcutta, where we used to have a pretty healthy rivalry with XLRI. I think we used to have an annual game series, but I'm not sure that that's there at this point in time. But anyway, very honored to be here and to talk to all of you. So let me talk to you a little bit about Elara Technologies and what we do there. So we operate in the real estate vertical, and it would not be an exaggeration to say that we are one of the leading proponents of real estate, not only in India, but across the globe. So we operate what is called as a full stack model. And I'm sure some of you may have heard of what full stack is. So when you go back to how businesses were run like a few years ago, so there were businesses which were focused on gathering supply. There were some businesses which were focused on generating leads, and then there were businesses that were focused on fulfilling supply. So if we were to talk about what Elara Technologies does and what our strategy is, we are a full stack player, meaning we pretty much play all three roles when it comes to real estate. One is we gather supply, either from developers who are focused on building new homes, from brokers who are interested in reselling homes on behalf of owners, or renting homes, again on behalf of owners. And the third is the owner side, where we recently embarked on owner monetization. Right? So one is we acquire supply, and the supply is pretty much exclusive to us. The second is we generate demand to match with the supply, meaning on the platform side, on housing as well as Makaan, we are always focused on the equilibrium between demand and supply. And we also fulfill the demand that we have generated on the platform. So that's what PropTiger does. So you could consider us similar to an Ola of real estate. So what does Ola do today? So Ola focuses on, first is acquiring supply, meaning they operate a fleet of vehicles, which is either owned by them or they work with affiliate drivers. The second is Ola generates demand. The third is Ola helps fulfill the demand and do the end-to-end transaction. Okay? So when you look at companies like Ola and you compare it with companies like, for example, Make My Trip, Ola is valued much more than a Make My Trip. Or even if you take a company like Airbnb, they are valued more than a Make My Trip simply for the reason that they do the consumer experience from end to end. And we are one of the very, very few companies in the real estate across the world that operates in the full stack model. I can only think of a few companies in China. So when you look at the real estate marketplace across the world, you find companies like, for example, Magic Bricks or 99 Acres that simply generate demand and they acquire supply, but they don't get to see the end-to-end fulfillment of the supply. A similar analogy is with respect to companies like LinkedIn, right? So if you take the late 90s and the early 2000s, you had a lot of job boards. So you had job boards like Monster, you had job boards like Naukri, you had more job boards like Hotjobs, right? But the problem that all these job boards faced was they knew who applied for the job, but they did not know who actually secured the job. Right? And that's what LinkedIn does beautifully, right? So today, if one of you were to apply for a job on, on LinkedIn, and then you were to change your profile status, then LinkedIn pretty much gets to know when you've joined a particular company, right? And over time, it's very interesting to build an algorithm of sorts, saying that if you want to join a Facebook and you want to be a software engineer, this is the career path that you need to take because Facebook tends to hire people with an X profile. Whereas if you want to join Google and if you want to be a software engineer, then Google hires people with a different profile. So they would hire, you know, they can effectively tell you that you need to pursue a career path of life. Right? So that's what makes the whole interesting, whole experience very, very interesting. Right? And over time, you build a very sophisticated algorithm that nobody can match. And with that, you can hope to create some sort of barrier to entry the market. So today I have a slide presentation for you around real estate. It's about 16 to 17 slides. And let's try to make the session as interactive as possible. So Priyanka, people can ask me questions either during the presentation or subsequent to the presentation.
Sure.
I leave it to the audience. Okay. So can I share my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
You
sir.
can.
So let me jump to the first slide, which is around the whole real estate market opportunity. So when I talk about the real estate market, this is a complete real estate market of all the companies participating in real estate, from companies which are doing construction to companies that are acquiring land, to developers, to brokers, to owners. So it is not necessarily representative of the TAM or the targeted addressable market that most companies would define. But I wanted to present these numbers to you to give you an idea of how staggering the opportunity is. So if you zero in on the second half of the page, so real estate is a pretty big market. It's the second largest contributor to GDP. And it's also the second largest employer in the Indian economy. So real estate employs about 50 to 60 million people. And a lot of it is unorganized, and a lot of laborers out there are unskilled. That's a different problem which we have in real estate, and the participants in the real estate market need to address that. But let's not focus on that. So we have a $180 billion opportunity in 2020, and the market is growing at a very rapid pace by about 27%. To about $1 trillion in 2030. And when you look at India as an economy, there are a lot of things that we can take away from. So India is the fastest growing economy globally, notwithstanding the blip that we've had due to the pandemic. So even over 2021, the economy is expected to grow by 8.5 to 9%, and that would rank the growth as number one ahead of countries such as China. The second is India has a burgeoning middle class population. It's unfortunate that some of them have slipped back into a lower middle class or below the poverty line. But again, that's a temporary blip on the radar. And the per capita income is expected to grow to about $2,900 by 2025. The second, which is a very, very interesting phenomenon, is that India is urbanizing at a very rapid pace. And people are migrating to what we call as a tier one or the top 10 cities in the country due to higher income and the higher standard of living. Although the government's push for smart cities has seen the emergence of tier two and tier three cities, which are the smaller cities in India. But it's staggering to see 40% urbanization and a population of about 600 million by 2030. And as a lot of you know, India is one of the youngest populations in the world. There are barely about 6 to 7% of the population which is about 60 years of age, which is pretty low when you compare it to countries like Japan, where about 30% of the population is greater than 60 years old. So you have a very young and aspirational labor force. And consequently, the middle class is also increasing. So when you look at the graph to the right, the chart shows that in FY12, the lower middle class constituted about 60% of the population, and that's expected to decline to about 38% by FY23. So what are the macroeconomic drivers that are likely to spur market growth? So one is this increasing digitization in the economy. And as all of you are seeing, we are talking via Zoom, and that would have been impractical in India a few years ago, primarily because of accessibility to the internet, as well as bandwidth issues. And so online real estate portals are really emerging as a discovery platform. Right? So a few years ago, people used to come to sites like housing.com or 99 acres or Magic Bricks simply to understand the range of homes that were available in the micro market. But today, consumers are consuming content very eagerly, particularly video content, given mobile penetration, acceleration, and increasing smartphone penetration. And consequently, people are using real estate portals not just to search for homes, but also to eventually discover the homes that they would eventually like to buy or rent, as the case may be. So what mobile penetration has done for India is that we have skipped the desktop generation. So today, when we look at a platform like housing.com, we always think of products with mobile first. So Google would also be switching to mobile first when it comes to indexing the internet. And about 85% of our audience accesses our platform through the mobile phone, either through the mobile web or through the app. Now, with the emergence of technology with digitization, right? So users are now looking for a seamless end-to-end home buying experience. And while I do not think that we'll get to a stage where buying a home will be as easy as dropping, let's say, an item on a shopping cart, as in the case of Flipkart and Amazon, we are seeing that the value that we are adding through digital platforms is moving down the value chain. And eventually, consumers will simply visit a home, or they would visit a site only once before they decide to buy a property. So we are already seeing that. And through our digital platforms, we have been able to drive about 11% of our transaction sales on PropTiger online. The market in India is also consolidating. So typically in a market like China, the top 10 developers account for about 30 to 40% of the total sales of new homes in the country. whereas in India, the top 10 players have accounted for about 10 to 12% of all home buying in the market. We are going to see things change over time, and we are looking at a fewer number of players. And a fewer number of players in any market is better for the simple reason that the top players are much better funded. They can employ innovative construction methods. So whenever you're operating at scale, you can always optimize on costs and deliver a better value product to the customers. And customers can also take confidence on the fact that they are buying home from reputed developers, and so the project will indeed get delivered on time. Along with that, there's been a lot of transparency and customer confidence in the real estate sector. And the government is moving towards digitization at a very fast pace. So we saw the onset of RERA, which is the Real Estate Regulatory Act in 2016, which required all new home launches to be pre-approved by a RERA authority. The second is that developers will be penalized if they do not complete the project on time. And the third is that there is a certain adjudicating authority to handle complaints of consumers. So this has brought in a lot of confidence amongst institutional investors, amongst banks, and amongst the end consumers. Recently, the government also passed a Model Tenancy Act, which lays down guidelines for both landlords as well as tenants with an adjudicating authority. And once states implement the Model Tenancy Act, you will see that the rental market is being reformed. So along with digitization of land records and the introduction of GST, we have seen a leap in consumer confidence and investor confidence in the real estate sector, which bodes well for the future growth of the sector. And with increasing consumer confidence comes increasing private equity investments across almost all segments of the real estate sector, and I'll get to that in a minute. The emergence of REITs. There are 3 publicly listed REITs in India, which is the Real Estate Investment Trust, which gives investors an ability to participate in commercial asset portfolio, which was too expensive earlier on. And REIT is like a $1 trillion asset in the US. And with increasing investments, you get to lower funding costs and ultimately better pricing for the consumers. And the introduction of the Housing for All by 2022. A lot of you must have heard about the Affordable Housing Initiative by the government, both on the website, and the provision of infrastructure status to the Housing for All segment, which has caused the homes to be a lot more affordable. So when you take a city like Mumbai, it would take about 12 to 13 years of a person's income to buy a home. And now that's come down to about 6 to 7. And that's primarily because developers are now incentivized to launch more affordable homes, which are homes priced in the up to 50 lakh range. And the last thing is the plan to develop 100 smart cities. All of us are witness to the huge amount of infrastructure development which is taking place in India, which is also causing a spur in growth in the tier 2, tier 3 cities. The metro connectivity, which is helping cities push their borders, and the huge growth which is taking place in the peripheral parts of the city, where it's more affordable for people to buy homes. So again, in the context of all this, we also have a very, very solid digital economy. So the digital economy is projected to grow to about $1 trillion by 2025. That's a 5-time growth in a period of 6 to 7 years, which shows a very, very strong growth of CAGR. The second fastest digitizing economy, with internet users only trailing China. And I've also presented some statistics out here. So when you look at smartphone devices for 500 million smartphone devices, we're going to get to almost 1 billion smartphone devices by 2025, which is a 1.8 times growth. The second is mobile data consumption. India has the cheapest mobile data in the world, and 1 GB in India costs less than 10 cents. And that is propelling a huge move towards online data consumption. And the average mobile data consumption is going to grow 2x to about 25 GB per subscriber. And the last thing is digital payment users. We are seeing a number of companies such as Paytm, BharatPay, PhonePay, and a number of companies and banks are also getting into the whole mobile wallet business. And digital payment users are expected to jump by about 5x to about 800 million. So all this bodes really, really well for real estate, which rapidly embraced the whole digitization curve last year during the onset of the first wave of pandemic. So when you look at real estate as a sector, it continues to attract high investment. So when you look at 2019, the sector attracted about $5.4 billion. And while the numbers dipped marginally in 2020, the numbers dipped largely in the first couple of quarters of 2020, largely due to the onset of pandemic. And we saw a lot of portfolio deals in the last quarter. So of all these sectors, you see considerable investment which is taking place in the office sector. The whole commercial real estate space is pretty interesting for the simple reason that a lot of companies have moved to a hybrid working environment, which is working partially from home and partially from the office. At the same time, we are also looking at de-densification of the office space. So what does that mean? On the average, a person is supposed to have about 120 square foot of office space. Over the years, companies, especially those in the BPO sector, have gradually cut down costs, and so they've reduced the per capita square footage to about 70. But now with social distancing norms, we will see a lot of de-densification. So consequently, office space per person is going to increase. The second is that with the solid growth in the Indian economy and with the fact that investors are viewing India with a favorable lens from the perspective of investment, a lot of jobs are going to be offshore to India. We are also going to see a nearshoring of jobs, which is companies located, let's say, in countries such as the Middle East, send their jobs to India. And consequently, we are seeing a huge growth in demand for commercial office space in cities such as Bangalore, Hyderabad, and Pune, which are the high-tech hotbeds in India. So consequently, you see a lot of demand for office space. And that's why a lot of investment is pouring into office space. The second is the emergence of REITs, where grade A office spaces are pulled into a sort of a portfolio. And individual investors can participate in REITs, meaning they can get shares in a commercial space listed entity and ultimately get about 9 to 10% returns. Retail space is going to be a little challenging, at least over the near future, for the simple reason that people will be a little wary of going to malls. Instead, the retail spaces in malls would probably be like fulfillment centers where people can go and pick up merchandise that they bought online. And we are really seeing the emergence of high street retail. So high street retail refers to smaller shops, which are usually situated in commercial buildings, where people don't aggregate in large numbers, and consequently the risk of infection spreading is lower. Hospitality, as you know, is another industry which has suffered along with travel, but which is likely to bounce back. But we are seeing a huge emergence of some sunrise sectors in real estate. So one is industrial, uh, where a lot of new industries such as electric vehicles, defense, and aerospace are coming up in India. The second is the data centers, with the government mandating that a lot of the data has to be held locally. We're seeing the emergence of large data centers in India. And the third is cold storage to cater to the increasing needs of the food and beverages industry. And for online players such as, for example, Fipola or Vicious, and the groceries delivery majors such as Big Basket. So all in all, it's a pretty exciting story. And notwithstanding the pandemic, we haven't really seen a huge dip in investments. So in terms of the real estate space, when you look at the residential sector, which is the bar chart on the extreme left, uh, one of the things which you see here is that new launches have been declining year on year. And to me, it seems like it's a good situation to be in for a couple of reasons. So one is that in India, a lot of developers, in some parts of the country, I should not say a lot of the developers, some of the developers, uh, you know, launched projects and either delayed completion of the projects or never completed the projects. So you might have heard of companies such as Unitech and Amrapali in the news. But with the introduction of RERA, uh, most of the companies have been focusing on completing existing projects and handing it over to consumers. So in terms of residential sales, 2020 was a bad year, at least during the first quarter. And, uh, and then the sector bounced back from July to February. And then there was a second wave of pandemic which set upon us. And you see in the first half of 2021, launches were pretty muted. So when you look at the January to June period, we had some launches in January to March. And in April to May, a lot of the new project launches were stalled. And when you look at sales, one of the interesting trends both in 2020 and 2021 is the fact that sales have exceeded new launches, which is a great sign for the sector because we have an overhang or unsold inventory of about 740,000. So as the unsold inventory begins to decline, developers would be incentivized to launch new projects. In the middle, you have the commercial sector. And as you can see, 2019 was a record year for the commercial sector, and the economy was growing pretty rapidly between 7 to 8%. And in 2020, by the first quarter of 2020, while the economy was not in a recession, we saw the economy slow down. So the growth rate in the first quarter of calendar year 2020 was about 4.5%. And then we witnessed a technical recession uh, from April through September uh, due to the onset of the coronavirus pandemic. And so consequently, you saw little supply in the market. So the supply numbers were muted compared to 2019. And absorption, which talks about how much of the new supply is absorbed in the market, minus the existing supply which gets vacated. So that also declined, and vacancy rates have increased to about 16%. The commercial sector will still be a challenge in 2021 as we cycle through the second wave and potentially the third wave of the pandemic. And companies are thinking of a hub and spoke approach when it comes to offices, where they have a fairly large headquarters, and then they have satellite offices where people could potentially walk to work. And co-working is also emerging as a potentially large space to contend with for a couple of reasons. So one is co-working is flexi space, so companies can be flexible in terms of taking up space, scaling up and scaling down. Second is the tenure for co-working is pretty flexible. And the third is all of this is managed infrastructure, which is plug and play. So, the companies do not have to invest a lot in capex in terms of having the offices fit out. So, co-working is going to be a space to look in the future. Similarly to co-living on the residential side, co-living is suffering at this point in time. Traffic levels are low, primarily because people are a little worried about living in a community. But again, I believe that's a short-term phenomenon that's already a $5 to $6 billion market opportunity. And lastly, when you look at industrial sector, which is warehousing, logistics, as well as emerging sectors such as data storage and you data centers and cold storage. I believe that that's a growing sector. So overall, things were fairly challenging in 2020. They were challenging in April and May. And in June, at least in the residential real estate sector, we saw a flurry of new supply in the market, which shows the flexibility and the enthusiasm amongst the developer community. And we saw year-over-year growth in sales. So I believe that barring a third wave or maybe a fourth wave of the pandemic, and I'm hoping that that does not hit us, we have bottomed out the real estate cycle. It's a mortgage enabling regime with interest rates at about 6.75%. And the importance of a home is pretty high in the minds of the consumer. In fact, in all the consumer sentiment surveys that we have done at housing.com over the last year, we have seen that people view real estate as the most stable asset class, given less volatility, less erosion in value, ahead of asset classes such as mutual funds, stock market, and gold, all of which have had varying degrees of volatility. I thought that this slide is pretty interesting and fascinating for all of us to see. India has always been hailed as the next China. And this sort of presents the tail of the tape. So when you look at the key parameters, India in 2020 versus China in 2007, it's eeringly similar, which kind of leads us to think that India could potentially leapfrog in terms of growth and get to where China is in 2020. So in 2020, India had GDP was about $2.5 trillion. And there's a lot of talk about doubling in India becoming a $5 trillion economy. 2007, China was at about $3.6 trillion, and China in 2020 was about $15 trillion in terms of the GDP. Urbanization rates of 2020 in India and 2007 in China are pretty similar. The real estate market was almost bang on the dot in 2007 and 2020. And today, China has transitioned from a $180 billion real estate market in 2007 to a $2.5 trillion in 2020. And the last is in terms of the addressable market for companies such as us. So China's brokerage market size was about $2.5 billion in 2007. And it's about $35 billion in 2020. So what this tells us is that with the right set of reforms, with the growing middle class sector, with a fast growing economy, with infrastructure development, and with the adoption of digital transactions, there's a huge growth potential for India to reach levels mirroring those of China. So when I look at the digital real estate audience and how that's grown over the last few years, and for confidentiality reasons, I'm not able to present the exact traffic numbers. So this is the audience to the overall housing.com site. from 2017 to 2021. And this only represents organic traffic or unpaid traffic. So this represents traffic from people who either type housing.com in the URL or who come in through to housing.com through like a Google search, search engine optimization as people put it. So we've seen a 5x growth in the number of monthly sessions. Uh, and one of the things you'd see is a sharp dip in the number of sessions from March 20 to April 20. That was during the first wave of the lockdown. But interestingly, when you look at March 21 to April 21, you don't see a similar sort of dip. Right? So what we have seen is that consumers are now confident of a stronger growth in the economy. About 70% of consumers whom we surveyed in December last year felt that economic conditions will improve. And so we didn't see the same sort of dip in audience that we saw last year. The lines lower to that, the first line represents the buy traffic, and the lowest line represents the rent traffic. So what is pretty interesting is that buy exceeds rent, which means that there are more number of people in the market who are always looking to buy homes. And unlike the US, where baby boomers or the older generation are the ones who are invested in homes. In India, we are seeing that we're seeing a strong propensity towards buying homes, both amongst the millennial generation and the current generation, the Gen Z generation, right? So people are aspiring to buy homes pretty early on in their career, right? So that's the first thing. The second, which you can see, is the slope of the buy graph versus the rent graph. Right? So from May 20 to May 21, April 21, the buy graph is growing at a much faster pace. So which shows that people value homes, especially post the pandemic. So people feel comfortable within the safety of their own homes. And when we did a recent survey amongst people as to what they value in a home, people talk about three things. One is access to healthcare, and developers are taking note of it, and they are tying up with, let's say, hospitals and healthcare providers to help people in times of need. Second is people prefer homes with larger open spaces, which means that the development should not be as dense as it is today. And third is people prefer amenities such as daycare centers. People also are looking for larger size homes. There's a higher increase in demand for homes which are 3 bedrooms and above in size. And the proportion of people looking for 1-bedroom homes, even in an expensive city like Mumbai, is low. So there is a significant growth, scope for further growth of real estate users. So here what we have done is that we have mapped the monthly unique users in millions. And we are then looking at the percentage of internet users who are accessing real estate site. So when you look at a site like Zillow, for example, Zillow has about 200 million unique users, which represents about 80% of the internet population in the US, followed by Real Estate Australia, which is one of our investors, which has a lower monthly unique users simply because the population is low, but about 50% of the internet users visit the real estate site. And you compare it with a typical site in India, where you find that less than 5% of internet users come to a real estate home, right? So this represents both an opportunity as well as a challenge. It is a challenge in the sense that it's very difficult to manage unit economics because you're constantly having to rebuild your traffic pool, because there is a certain percentage of audience which is organic every month. That audience usually churns off by about 3 months. And then you have to attract a newer audience, right? So that makes it really challenging. But it represents an opportunity in that if we are able to provide tools to users, such as what is the value of the home, then people would come to the site more frequently. So in fact, when you look at a site like Zillow, people come to Zillow.com to look at Zestimate and to understand, what the home value is. People come to a site like Real Estate Australia because they want to understand how expensive electricity would be, if they wanted to move to a particular home. So there's a lot of engagement there that these portals are doing to constantly drive the lifetime value of the user up and to get users to visit their sites on a recurring basis. Whereas in India, we have been unable to do so. But with digitization of land records and better access to, let's say, the transactions that are taking place in the marketplace, there is a huge scope for players to deploy tools such as AI and come up with automated valuation models, both on the rental side and the home buying side, which will help uh, users and which will improve user engagement levels. So when you look at global PropTech, right, which is property technology, which is labeled as PropTech, so you see the huge growth in PropTech over the years. So when you look at 2019, global PropTech investment topped about $30 billion. There are a lot of issues in the property segment, and there are a lot of pain points that can be resolved at different stages of the home buying or the home renting journey, which is what these companies are focused on solving. Till recently, uh, most of the PropTech investment was concentrated either in US and in Europe, and with Asia being slow to the whole digitization game, uh, we've only seen Asian companies gain some momentum in PropTech post the 2000s. So currently, about 70% of PropTech companies in Asia are concentrated in China, India, and Singapore. And one of the things which is noteworthy, which is there on the bar chart on the right, is that despite the whole challenge that we had in the economy due to the onset of the pandemic, investors did recognize the value of PropTech and the accelerated digitization taking place in the Indian space. And consequently, the amount of investment that went into PropTech was about $500 million in 2020. And this will simply continue going forward. So we strongly believe that digital disruption is the future of the real estate sector. Uh, and in fact, I would say that the current pandemic has acted as a growth catalyst for companies such as us in the PropTech space. So when you look at the kind of problems that people are trying to resolve, right? So broadly, if you categorize it as search, which is a process of searching for a property, there's a lot of emphasis on virtual viewing solutions. And I will present some examples of some of the augmented reality, the virtual reality, the drone shoots that we do on an ongoing basis at Elara Technologies, and we are one of the pioneers in the PropTech space. A second is a lot of focus on data, valuation, and analytics. And I talked to you about the automated valuation models as a case in point. The second is the whole process of supervision of the real estate, the construction. So one is we're seeing a lot of companies try to indulge in crowd financing. We are seeing the emergence of newer construction technologies in countries such as China and US with like 3D printing of homes. Uh, the emergence of technologies such as bricklaying machines, the usage of drones. We are yet to see some of that in India. Uh, but as time goes on, the market consolidates and the larger players achieve better economies of scale. It is going to facilitate the introduction of such technologies. We are also seeing the emergence of space service, which is what I talked to you about in terms of both co-living as well as co-working. We are seeing the emergence of smart buildings and the emergence of IoT, the Internet of Things, and the emergence of smart homes, which is yet to go mainstream in India, but is likely to go mainstream. We are seeing a lot of companies try to resolve issues in the whole selling space. Companies such as Zillow have introduced iBuyer solutions where they use their data to bid for homes, buy it, and then flip the homes either when the market becomes better or through addition of value to the homes. We're seeing a lot of companies try to digitize the mortgage and the lending process. And we are starting to see companies not in India, but overseas, where the real estate title is being held and transferred through blockchain technologies. So on the right side, we have some parts of the ecosystems. One is the developers and others are consumers. And I've just tried to present a snapshot of how these players in the ecosystem are using PropTech. So one is virtual reality, which consumers are using to substitute for a physical site visit, which is a little risky, especially in the COVID time period. The second is the usage of drones to showcase not only the home, but the entire project and the physical and social and the living infrastructure around the locality, which makes for a better experience for the customer. And I'll show you the example of a drone show. The third is the emergence of cloud computing, which is resulting in hardware expense saving for the developers and improving the scalability of the business. And then from the consumer's point of view, they are able to use integrated solutions such as payment gateways. So recently we launched a pay rent product where people can pay rent through their credit cards. And I can say that it was a resounding success. The fourth, as I told you, is blockchain, which makes it easier and less expensive to hold digital land records and to transfer records, and far more secure than in the physical agreement world that we live in. And from the consumers, this is interesting because it helps them own fractal or fractional ownership space in real estate assets. So you're seeing companies such as Strata in India, where companies are trying to help individual consumers own like fractional spaces, mostly in commercial office spaces. And lastly, as I said, the whole Internet of Things, big data, and AI, which is going to improve lifestyle of the consumers and provide them access to technology to be able to manage the homes remotely. So again, this is a kind of a chart where I wanted you guys to get a perspective of the number of companies trying to resolve problems in the internet space. And more than that, the kind of improvements which is possible. So a lot of the companies that are mentioned here on this chart are companies which are located in developed countries such as the US, where the real estate market is much more evolved. But you can see the whole number of issues and the number of problem-solving opportunities in the whole real estate space, right from the time of searching a property to buying a property to the post-sale transaction process to looking for home interiors to looking for movers and packers. And a lot of companies here are trying to resolve the whole problems around the real estate process. So here, even in India, this is we expect digitization across stages in the buying journey. and we are already working on that and seeing the ROI that we are deriving through digitizing the home buying process in a company such as PropTiger, which has historically been known for being an offline company. So right from lead generation, where we are focused more on multi-channel marketing, we are moving to omni-channel or reaching out where the customer is. The second is instead of using a pre-sales team and using a asset-heavy sales team to go and meet the customers, we are trying to provide a virtual experience through digital platforms, content products, and ultimately get the consumer to shortlist the properties that they are interested in. Third is consumers have historically been known to make as many as 9 to 10 site visits before buying a property. And during the COVID pandemic, we brought that down by about 30%. So we want to focus on fewer site visits. Site visits are expensive for the developer. They are time consuming for the customer, and they're expensive for us because we do not want to bring low intent buyers to the site, but we want to have customers with a reasonably high degree of intent. And the third is the whole closure process and the offline post-sales validation. And here we are embarking on a digital journey where we're planning to do KYC through companies such as Legality. We have launched a product like Housing Edge where people can, for example, get movers and packers and do home interiors in a few clicks without having to do like a physical visit to a lot of offline stores. And the third is, even the whole transaction documentation, which is pretty onerous when it comes to buying a home, is something that we are trying to move on. So there's increasing digital adoption in the home buying journey. Right? And just presented some statistics to showcase that. About 60% of the buyers are willing to use digital platforms for search and discovery. About 90 to 95% of consumers are searching for homes online, and about 60% are willing to use the internet to shortlist the homes that they want to buy. About 40% of the buyers are willing to close the deal virtually. So in fact, in countries such as the US, during the period of pandemic, about 30% of sales were done virtually. There are a number of companies in China which are in the process of making the home buying process virtual. And even in India, we implemented direct.proptiger.com or PropTiger Direct, where about 11 to 15% of our home sales is done by people interacting with the digital platform and making at the most 1 or 2 site visits. About 60% are willing to avail services such as interior designs, property management services, and furniture rentals through digital platforms. And through Housing Edge, one of the things that we are endeavoring to do is to trying to bring the adjacent industries online. So we want to digitize home loans where people can submit their entire documentation, get a transaction approval, and secure their home loan online. We have brought in rental agreements online. We have brought in tenant verification online. So the process and the vision is to digitize a lot of the adjacent services. And to the right, I presented some of the tier 1 cities in terms of the readiness to go in for digital solutions. Most of the cities are ready to a large extent, and I particularly draw your attention to cities such as Pune, Bangalore, and Hyderabad, particularly Hyderabad and Bangalore, where these being IT-driven cities, people are more receptive to digital solutions. And even a city, such as Ahmedabad, we are seeing people are very ready to embrace digital solutions. During the period of pandemic and even now, we have seen over 100% growth in online audience of tier 2 and tier 3 cities. And that's not just in real estate. So even in on e-commerce, when Amazon hosted its great Indian shopping festival, Amazon said that about 60% of its new users came in from tier 2, tier 3 cities. So the broad message is that pandemic has helped us accelerate digitization by, I would say, a couple of years. And in one way, it's really helping us transform the real estate space from an offline environment to an online environment. And I believe that the acceleration of digitization in India, not only in real estate, but across almost all sectors, we're seeing huge evidence of that in e-commerce, in spaces such as healthcare, in spaces such as edtech, and a lot of verticals are digitizing pretty rapidly. So again, consumers are not only willing to embrace digitization, and while India has been a little late to the whole Internet of Things, we're seeing a pretty strong CAGR in terms of people looking for smart homes. So the CAGR in India from 21 to 25 at about 20% is far higher than any of the other countries that we see here. And people are looking for smart home access, whether it's through energy savings, home security systems, remote access, augmented entertainment experience, and the emergence of sectors such as assisted care and senior living, and the use of the Internet of Things to as a reminder for smart cooking devices and automated cleaning. In fact, on housing and Makaan, we did launch an Alexa skills for real estate searches. And I wouldn't say that it was very, very successful, because I think we are yet to see a deep penetration in for assistants such as Alexa and Google. But I'm pretty sure that we are going to get there. So in summary, I just would like to spend a couple of minutes talking about some of the digitization products that we as a company have innovated. On a search and discovery phase, we have digitours and walkthroughs, which are like 3D representations of homes. We also work on area wikis, which help showcase the locality. We work on drone shoots, and we host virtual events, which is really helps drive a lot of audience and a lot of online home buying. The second is in terms of shortlisting and site visit. So we have innovated in the space of augmented reality in the area of smart devices such as DigiSlate, which is a touch screen similar to a tablet, and on live tours where people can lead as many as 300 or 400, or the number as you take it, through a live tour of their home. And even small brokers in India are willing to embrace such technologies. On the closure and documentation side, we have innovated on an online booking engine, which while I would say is still in its early days, has shown a good amount of promise, especially during the period of lockdowns. We have innovated on services such as online rental agreements and tenant verification. And in terms of post-closure, I talked to you about our vision to either be a principal player or tie up and partner in adjacent industries, so that a lot of the home renting and the home buying experience and services associated with that come on. So for example, today you can pay a rent via credit card, you can avail of home services where we have partnered with Urban Company, you can rent furniture, you can apply for, let's say, a home loan, and you can avail of movers and packers, right? If I can take a couple of minutes, I would like to showcase a couple of products so that you get an idea of the solutions that I'm talking about. And post that, I'd be happy to take on any questions that you have. The first one is that I want to show you is augmented reality. So this is for a developer in Chennai who did not have the project set up. Even the excavation at the site had not begun. And so we took on this challenging task of simulating the entire project on augmented reality, where somebody could simply scan a code and project the model and experience the entire project end to end, from the augmented reality model which is projected. So let me take you through that. So this is, for example, the model which is created on a table, right? So a user can scan the mobile phone and simply project the model onto the table. And you can virtually do everything. You can flip the model. You can take a night view of the model, right? And you can do a walkthrough and look at the different podiums and brochures. And you can also drop a lead through the model. So this is an example of this is all virtual. None of it is real. And you can see how real the experience is. This is an example of an individual sample apartment which we have created. This is the tower lounge, and one of the things that you can see here is how we have managed to simulate the exterior. This is the whole podium. So this is the entire showcasing of the experience virtually that we have been able to do. So let me lead you through the actual. So this is what I showed you on PDF right now. So you project the model onto a table from your mobile phone. I'm sorry, the quality is not great because we're looking at it from a mobile capture from a mobile device. And to fast forward, you can flip the model around. You can look at the day-night view that I just showed you. And then you can take a look at the floor plan and you can go through individual apartments. And none of this is real. It's all virtually created by us. This is the whole exterior view. And here you can see the swimming pool. So this is one of the experiences that we have helped create for our customers. So this is an example of a drone shoot that we did. We do for a lot of customers. So this is for a project in Gurgaon, where we showcase how the locality around the project looks like, right? So we kind of show the whole micro market, the availability of malls, the availability of hospitals, parks, schools, so that when users are looking to buy a particular project, they're able to get a bird's eye view of the entire locality. This is a very, very popular product that we launch for our customers. Third is something like a digital, right? Where people can come to a platform, and again, this is virtual. This is not a real property. And you can see how fast it loads. So this is basically done using a patented image compression technique. And this works on a progressive loading basis. So there's very little buffering, and you can move through an auto tour and look at the entire property. So again, all of this is rendered virtually, and you can look at the quality of output that we are able to provide. And you can zone into different aspects of the property. Uh, you can look at the floor plans, and ultimately you can drop a lead saying that I'm interested in this particular project. So this is an example of an interactive 3D floor plan. Sorry, I think I'm running through some internet. So, I mean, we have a whole bouquet of products, and one of the fundamental things that I would like all of you to learn is we should always be in a situation where market requires technology, and meaning that there should be a technology solution that the market is requiring and the market appreciates and pays for it, rather than be in a situation where you're building a technology and then looking to find a market for it. Right? So the fact that we've invested a lot of money in building these platforms and servicing customers on an ongoing basis, it speaks volumes of the level to which the Indian real estate market is digitizing. And we are seeing not only large-scale developers and or smaller developers, but we are seeing owners and brokers also willing to pay for such products. So lastly, just wanted to provide you, some initial vectors on the engagement that we are seeing on PropTiger Direct. So our digital platforms contribute to more than 10% of overall sales. So we are able to engage 2x the number of users that we would be able to do in offline mode, which means that the sales team becomes more scalable and the productivity of the sales team improves tremendously. The second is of the users who visit our platform, more than 20% do some sort of content consumption. The third is that time spent on a digital platform where we have videos and brochures, and we have the ability for users to do a real-time connect with our sales team, is 5x the time which they spend on a platform with static listings. And as I said, it's been contributing significantly to the overall sales. So I'm sorry, I think I overshot my time, but I do hope this gives you a perspective in terms of real estate digitization. So in summary, I think a huge opportunity in real estate, a lot of problems to solve in real estate across various aspects of real estate, right from the whole process of viewing a home to a virtual tour, to transaction documentation, to transferring title with the emergence of technologies such as blockchain. So that's one. Second is with India digitizing at a rapid pace, more of the market is going to move online. And while buying a home will ultimately not become mainstream in the sense, I don't see 60 or 70% of all home sales, for example, just picking a number, hypothetically, to be on a digital platform. But you will find about 10 to 15% of sales happen digitally, and people will shortlist homes and ultimately lower the number of site visits before buying a home. The third is a lot of the adjacent services in real estate, right from finding a painter to home interiors to home loans to tenant verification. All of it is moving online, and that's moving at a very rapid pace. A fourth is we are seeing a massive digital penetration, not only in tier 1 cities, but in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, not only in the real estate segment, but across all sectors as well. And lastly, the Indian audience values the home higher than prior to the pandemic. People across all age groups, particularly in the millennial segment and even the younger age group, uh, are looking out to buy homes. We are seeing a frenzy in home buying in other developed cities in developed countries such as US. In fact, in countries such as New Zealand, real estate prices were appreciated by as much as 20% in the last year. In the US, it's been about 10% because demand far outstrips supply. And while that's not happened in India for a variety of reasons, we believe that the market is in a very healthy state. We are going to see the emergence of newer formats in real estate, people looking for larger size homes, people looking for co-living kind of formats. And on the commercial space, you're going to see companies which are going to move to a hub and spoke model. And a lot of even the larger companies look towards flexible working space. You're seeing a lot emergence of newer sectors in the commercial space, such as industrial, warehousing, logistics, and data centers and cold storage. So overall, I believe it's a solid growth story from now on. We have probably bottomed out. Prices are not going to decline further. On the contrary, we are likely to see some sort of appreciation in prices, particularly as construction costs have gone up over the last year. So that's it from now. I'm happy to take on any questions and answers.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, sir. It was such an illuminating session. Without any further ado, and considering the time constraints we have, it is time to start a quick Q&A session. I request Shweta to please go ahead with the question.
Hi, sir. Good evening.
Hi.
This was really a very insightful session. So my question is related to the contenthousing.com or a platform of this is a very complex area, complex sector. There's a delay in the delivery of projects and all. So suppose a user comes and he gets his flat through the housing.com. So is there any control on the builder's side if there is any delay or anything, or it's just at a platform that we buy and we get the contact and we just take it further from there?
Yeah, so you're right. So we are a marketplace, right? So at the end of the day, the endeavor of the marketplace is to provide liquidity. So we want to provide a healthy balance of supply as well as demand on the platform. And so it's a platform with a lot of disclaimers, like most other platforms. So we are just a marketplace where people can express their interest in buying a property or renting a property. And then thereupon the due diligence needs to be done by buyer. So PropTiger, on the other hand, is a brokerage business where we are in the business of selling actual homes. So we take consumers onto the sites, the physical sites of the developers, and end up consummating the transaction, which is the whole concept of full stack that I talked to you when I started off the presentation.
Thank you.
Next, Shirish, you may go ahead with the question.
Hello, can you hear me,
Yeah.
sir?
Yeah.
Hi. So thank you so much for your insights on that. I just wanted to understand one thing from the slide 6 which you presented. I mean, China was in 2007 where we are now. So do you think how many more years would it take for India to reach that stage? And what are the trends that, I mean, the technological, refinement we have to do to get there?
I mean, that's a fantastic question. So thank you for asking that. As you know, I don't have a crystal ball to look into and give you a precise answer. But my answer, so let's look at it from a couple of points of view, right? So one is from the point of view of technology in terms of there's some kinds of solutions that I presented to you, the acceleration of digitization and all of that. Right? From that perspective, I think we are pretty much out there, right, in terms of smartphone penetration and getting consumers online. So we are out there. The second thing is in terms of developers adopting new construction technologies. Right? As I explained to you, earlier, of the 5 to 6 crore workers in the construction industry in India, so about 80 to 85% are unskilled. So the average person starts off by being a helper, learns the craft from somebody else, and eventually becomes a skilled construction worker. Right? So you very rarely have people who come to the site being construction ready. I know that there's a National Skill Development Corporation, the CREDI, which is the developers body, is doing a lot to focus on that. But we are actually very, very far off from there, right? So in fact, when you look at events such as a pandemic, we had massive unemployment on one side. Our unemployment rates touched about 23 to 25% in April. And at the same time, there's a shortage of workers in the construction sites, simply because a lot of the workers are unskilled and a lot of them don't have an employment security. Right? So developers need to focus a lot on employing new construction technologies, which will help them accelerate the pace of construction. And to employ such technologies, you need to be able to operate at a certain scale, which is why saying that the market needs to consolidate, and you need to have fewer developers, but developers operating at a very, very large scale who can employ these construction technologies. So that's the second part. The third part of it is the whole infrastructure, and this is where I think we are way behind. We don't live in cities which are planned. Our infrastructure barely keeps pace with the pace of development. And if you look at cities such as Mumbai, the city is constantly pushing its borders. So for Mumbai, we have moved to a Mumbai metropolitan region. Right? And in some areas where there's some amount of building development going on, let's say a city like place like Bhiwandi, it's hardly any physical or social infrastructure. Of course, we're trying to construct metros. The government is doing its best. But we need to really focus on improving the infrastructure, improving healthcare facilities, and the government should do its best to ensure that at least the newer parts of the cities are organized in a much more planned manner. Except for a city such as Hyderabad, in most other cities, you find that the healthcare facilities are clustered in one part of the city, for example, in Bangalore in the east, while you have development happening all across. So all these things kind of need to move in tandem. The opportunity is there, the economic growth is there, and there is an audience out there who's willing to buy homes, and there's a huge middle class segment of the population. But unless all these things line up together, it's going to be difficult for us to match up, right? The point in me showing the slide was to show that there is an opportunity out there.
Thank you, sir. Just another question. What are the prospects for an MBA graduate in the real estate? And what are the skills you would have to hone about for that?
I don't know about your personal career interests or the interests of the group. I'm sure a lot of you would be interested in startups. So there's a lot of problems to be resolved in real estate, right? And in the slide that I showed you, I showed you the kind of startups which are coming up in countries such as the US, where people are picking very small problems, right? The whole problem of transaction documentation, holding title, and using something like blockchain to manage that, right? So there are a lot of opportunities. And honestly, I think one of the challenges in real estate is a scarcity of qualified professionals, such as you. So for those who have a strong interest in real estate, and being an MBA graduate myself, I find it professionally fulfilling to help people buy homes. So there are a lot of opportunities out there.
Thank you.
Thank you. I request next Rahul to go ahead with your question.
Hello, sir. Thank you very much for a wonderful session. My question to you is, Elara Technology has been recently ranked 48th among the best workplace. So, what were some of the unique steps that has been taken by your organization to constantly maintain the workplace culture, particularly during COVID?
So one is, I think we have a very strong set of values, and everybody right from the leadership team, we try to live by those values. So, and the values are very, very carefully thought through. Values such as respect, trust, boundarylessness, ownership, excellence. So that's one. We clearly define set of values. So that's one. The second is that we pay a lot of attention to employee engagement, and even during the period of COVID, we had regular employee engagement sessions, and that's as simple as playing online Ludo together to an unfiltered session by, let's say, the CEO and by myself, where we talk to employees and try to understand their issues. Right? Third is we maintain a very strong work-life balance during even the pandemic. One of the challenges working from home is that the distinction between your personal life and your professional life gets blurred, and sometimes you lose sense of the time. Right, so there's no physical gap between your work and your home. Right? And so we made sure that people were not burnt out working remotely. The fourth is that we took a very long-term view of the opportunity ahead of us. So rather than say that, okay, we are going through a pandemic and we have to do a 25% layoff, we said that, listen, we have a very talented workforce. And what we are seeing is a short-term blip in the market. We are going through a downturn in the market, which is largely due to the coronavirus pandemic and an act of God, as the government called it. And the market will rebound as a huge opportunity. So we really desisted from doing layoffs. We did take a pay cut right from the CEO to the last person in the organization. Everybody took a pay cut, depending on the grade. But starting October, when the company started doing phenomenally well, we doubled up on that by repaying the pay cuts that people took. So people were extremely happy with that. And in fact, the financial year which just concluded in June was the best year in the history of the organization. So despite the COVID challenges that we had, due to the technology DNA and a very, very committed set of employees, we managed to do the best in the history of the company.
Thank you, sir. And for the final question of the day, I request Ayush to please go ahead with your question.
Yes, good evening, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, sir, for this insightful session. My question is regarding e-commerce. As we know, this e-commerce industry has been there for quite some time and growing. So, how do you see that emergence of this e-commerce business would benefit this real estate business? And also, will like providing and renting a warehouse would would it be a future real estate business in the future? I mean.
Yeah, to answer your question, as I said, right, online sales or mostly digital sales drives about 10 to 15% of the business on the private side. But what we have to understand is that home buying or even home renting is an emotional journey. Home buying particularly is a very emotional journey. And a lot of us would buy one home, or let's say maybe more fortunate, maybe buy a second home or a third home. And it's not an impulsive purchase, so it's not as easy as buying a pair of shoes on, let's say, on Amazon. And so one needs to touch and feel and experience the product, right? So I do not see real estate go mainstream as an e-commerce platform, But as I said, a large part of the home to buying journey is moving online. And the second question you had is?
Sir, the second question was, could the providing a warehouse and renting it a real estate business in the future?
I think that's a huge growth area. So as I said, we are seeing the emergence of larger scale warehouses. And we'll probably even see smaller scale warehouses in India. As e-commerce companies typically try to compress the time it takes to deliver products to customers. So you're likely to see even a like a building in a nearby locality transform into a warehouse. So I think the warehousing market is pretty huge. And so the logistics and warehousing business is a huge business. So in fact, you're seeing startups such as, for example, delivery, like some of you might have heard, right? In the courier and logistics space, get funded pretty sizable.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I, Kaushik, on behalf of XLRI ExPGDM class of 21-22, would like to sincerely thank you for taking out valuable time from your busy schedule and enrich us with a holistic view about the trends and trajectory of real estate market trajectory in India, factors driving its growth, and the key role digitization has played in the scene. Thank you, sir, and we wish you a very happy.
I mean, thank you so much. And to those of you who have an interest in real estate and looking for opportunities in real estate, I'd like to help you to the best of my ability. It's been an honor talking to
Thank you,
sir.
thank you, sir, for your time.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
Have a happy weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.